Okay, welcome back to Feature Fanatics, where we talk about the movies that have us obsessed, excited, and inspired. And joining us is the host of the Talkin' TV podcast, which I have been a guest on a couple times these last few months. It's Dominic Ritzy here today. How are you, Dom?
Good to be here, Gal. Thanks for having me.
Of course, it's glad to have you on to level the playing field a bit, because I've been on a few times on your channel, and now you'll be in a couple of our videos. So first, I wanted to start on the trades, talking about a couple new movie and TV news segments that have caught my eye. Some even announced today. So first of all, we have what could be the most unnecessary movie of all time, which is the How to Train Your Dragon live-action remake, has cast Gerard Butler to play Stoic, to reprise his role from the animated movies. Now, you know, what I do say with this casting is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I would also apply that logic to continue to say, why is this movie existing?
Yeah, I saw this. I'm a little bit torn on some of these latest live action reboots. I believe I've made it a point the last couple of years to boycott every single one that Disney's been doing, which is something that I've pretty much been sticking to. I remember the biggest thing as far as the Disney announcements went was that The Rock was going to be reprising his role as Maui in the new in the upcoming live action Moana movie.
Even worse, honestly.
Right. But so that's what I'm saying is, I'm like, okay, so now DreamWorks is hopping on that bandwagon too, where they're just saying, okay, DC spent an entire decade ripping off and trying to rip off and completely failing with Marvel, and now DreamWorks is going to start doing that with Disney with their live action stuff, in terms of just like ripping each other off, where you got Gerard Butler coming in. The funniest thing is that in the past I've said that the How to Train Your Dragon movies is probably my favorite Gerard Butler performance, which should tell you a lot about the types of movies that he's done and the caliber of actor that he is. But that being said, yeah,
I haven't seen one of his shitty action movies in a while.
You're not missing anything, I promise you. But it's stunt casting to me. It's more things in order to try and make headlines. And my honest answer is, like, all the people who I know who already love the How to Train Your Dragon movies are gonna watch this for a variety of different reasons, but most of them just to see how it's not gonna be as good as the animated efforts. And I can't imagine that anybody who is not already familiar with this IP is really gonna care.
Yeah, and the thing is, look, How to Train Your Dragon, the movies are still fresh in their memory, and I think all three of them are honestly pretty close to, if not perfect, movies. They're some of the most beautiful animated movies I've ever seen, arguably the best movies DreamWorks has ever made, and just to sustain their legacy, because when How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World came out, they made such a thing out of saying this is the final movie. And I was like, wow, even if they're making more Kung Fu Pandas, maybe eventually Shrek 5, it'll be beautiful to see they just made 3 How to Train Your Dragon movies and called it a day. And then about a year ago now, they announced that this remake was happening, and I was like, why? And it, you know, a similar thing that Disney's been doing, you know, they take these same musical cues, these same shots. You know, The Little Mermaid had the same songs. Beauty and the Beast had the same songs. The Lion King had pretty much every single of the same shot. So here, the music's going to be great, but it's because John Powell already did the same themes for the 2010 movie. Or Stolic's going to be great, but because we saw him already. You know, he's got the same director. Like, what do we care? You know, you got Mason Thames, who was the kid in the Black Phone, and Nico Parker, who was in Dumbo and The Last of Us. Of course, Tandy Way Newton's daughter, a wonderful actor. It's not even the fact that, like, the crew is bad. It's just staining, like, such an incredible animated franchise. Like, why not just make more animated Netflix short films, or like another prequel TV series? I don't even know. Like, why this doesn't sound fair for live action. Why can't they just make a movie called Dragon something else? This makes me mad, bro.
Well, because, Gal, didn't you know that this goes in the line of the new business model, which is they say that something's going to be great, they say that it's going to be the ending, and then wait a couple of years, and they're just going to bring back a new one. I mean, it's the Toy Story trilogy all over again. This is literally, this story is literally becoming the Toy Story of the DreamWorks saga, where you have arguably their most consistent, their best trilogy that they put out, arguably the one that I would say that, like, defined their trilogy. It's not quite the same, because, like, Shrek is kind of associated with DreamWorks the way that Toy Story is with Pixar, but the difference is that the Shrek...
Yeah, but it's not even like a How to Train Your Dragon 4 30 years later taking place. It's like a live action movie.
I prefer that. I mean, I would prefer
Than a
that
live action,
personally
definitely.
than a live
Yeah.
action. Yeah, absolutely. But so that's the thing, right? So they said that Toy Story 3 was it. That was the ending. You let a decade go by. You have that perfect ending. And next thing you know, roughly a decade later, you have 4. Now they announced that they're going to do 5, but that's still animated. This time, you've got these How to Train Your Dragon movies, like I said, all pretty well beloved, all pretty critically well acclaimed. I wasn't as big a fan of The Hidden World as you were, but still, that was pretty consistent and solid. Probably, I still personally think that Madagascar is a better trilogy than How to Train Your Dragon, but that's...
Oh, wow, really?
Oh,
Damn.
yeah, no, I've got some
I don't think the second one's that good, but...
I've got some controversial opinions on DreamWorks, to say the least. But regardless, right? It's been, but what's crazy is now they're not even letting it be like a decade time pass. They're not even giving it time to sit, you know? Now it's only been, 5 years since The Hidden World? Not even? It'll be 6 by the time this movie comes out next year. So
if this was like in 2040 and they revisited the franchise 20 years later, maybe it could be interesting. But this is just like, I love seeing big action blockbusters in theaters. I don't even think I'll look. It's a year and a half in the future, but I don't know. I don't feel like this would intrigue me unless there was like Christopher Nolan announced that he was like taking over as director or something. I don't know. Some miracle would have to happen for me to get excited for this.
Listen, you say that, but then the first, mark my words, the first teaser's going to drop, and they're going to end it, and they're going to play the How to Train Your Dragon theme music underneath the whole thing, and everybody's going to lose their
Everyone's going to be like,
minds.
oh my God, my childhood. This is my most anticipated movie of the year now.
Exactly.
Like they said for The Lion King.
Exactly.
So yeah, next piece of news is concerning a franchise that may or may not have a brighter future, but it has lost not just Jonathan Majors, but Steven Yeun has departed Thunderbolts, which for me is right now my most anticipated of the upcoming Marvel lineup, just because it sounds like it could be a really fun concept. I love Florence Pugh, I love Io Adebari, and I love Steven Yeun, and it's the creative gang behind Beef. But Steven Yeun has now left, and he was heavily rumored to play the role of Sentry. So that brings the question of, is there anyone that we're sort of excited that could maybe replace him and also be great in the role?
I mean, the biggest news circulation seems to be circling around the fact that Marvel desperately wants Ryan Gosling for a part, and so he was pretty heavily rumored. Also, the fact that Gosling looks more like the comic accurate version of the character than Steven Yeun did. Also, I mean, if we're just talking about like the upcoming Marvel slate, right? So obviously we know that because of the strike, Marvel pushed every single upcoming of their movies except for Deadpool 3 to 2025. So now we have Captain America: Brave New World, Fantastic Four, Thunderbolts, and Blade are all set to open respectively in February, May, July, and November of 2025. On top of the 2 DC movies that are going to be coming out that year, which are Superman Legacy from James Gunn and Matt Reeves' The Batman Part 2. So with those in mind, right, you got to keep in mind a couple things. One, the fact that all of these movies have been affected by the strike. 2, the fact that Brave New World, which I believe was the only one that had completed filming, had such awful test results when they were testing it, that they basically went and reshot entire sections of the movie, which leads me to assume that they're going to reshoot. They're going to pull a solo and reshoot vast majority parts of that movie. Now, when it comes to Thunderbolts, right? Thunderbolts is one where I've been excited because of the initial concept, but because of obviously all the behind the scenes, then finding out who the initial team lineup was going to be, I've got a slight problem because, first of all, going back to my previous point in terms of, DC spent an entire decade trying to rip off Marvel and failing horrifically at it. Now we're kind of seeing the reverse where DC is basically done and gone, right? We finally wrapped up this current slate. James Gunn is rebooting the whole thing in a couple years.
Very unceremoniously, yeah.
But what's interesting now is, so you see Marvel essentially trying to put out their own version of Suicide Squad, because let's face it, that's what the Thunderbolts are. They're supervillains that are basically...
Hey, the Suicide Squad was really good. So if you got the director of Beef... You never know.
Right, so that's the thing, but we also know Marvel's previous track record with directors. Now, like I said, I am slightly curious about the new slate of directors they have coming up. I like Yann Diman. I like Matt Shakman, obviously, in the work that he did in WandaVision and all the work that he's done on all the TV shows that he's worked on. Still not entirely sure about Brave New World. Julius Ona has been hit or miss, to say the least, but obviously, like you said, the fact that this is the team that did Beef, Jake Schreier, who also directed Fault in Our Stars, which I had completely forgotten about. And so that obviously really impressed me.
No, Paper Towns. He did Paper Towns.
That's the one. Sorry, I keep getting my John Green adaptations mixed up.
Fault in Our Stars was someone else. Josh Boone, yeah.
That's it.
Who
Josh
did
Boone. Who did New
one of the worst Marvel movies.
Okay. So this is proving my point. I knew that they all tied together. So basically my point, right? So so you have the Thunderbolts, right, which is traditionally a lineup of super villains, right? Not like anti-heroes, not anything else, like super villains. They were assembled by Baron Zemo to attack the Avengers when they were originally the Masters of Evil, and then a lot of them got revamped when Zemo was trying to like pull a hood on by being like, oh, we're good guys now, and that was just to like make the Avengers look bad. And then you obviously have the whole, you know, when they were officially commissioned by S.H.I.E.L.D., and then you have Norman Osborn forming his Dark Avengers, who were all previously Thunderbolts members. When he took over S.H.I.E.L.D., and reformed it as Hammer. So you have all of that history to pull from. But the point being is that the Thunderbolts have been traditionally villains. And who is the roster lineup this time? Florence Pugh's
mostly
Black
anti-heroes.
Widow. Right. Right. Dave Harbour's Red Guardian. Ghost. Taskmaster, who are both previously established as being like, you know, completely used and brainwashed and not villains. John Walker, a.k.a. U.S. Agent. Again, none of these guys are villains. They're all anti-heroes. And I would even go so far as say that the anti-hero is a little bit of a stretch because, like, with the exception of, like, I'd say the Ghost, maybe, none of these guys are actually, like, villains that have really had, like, their own say. They've all been used. They've all been manipulated by, like, other corrupt organizations. So, like, this is going to be much more...
Wyatt Russell was... My bad. Well, Wyatt Russell was proved to be pretty unlikable, so I'd make that point that he could be sort of like the Peacemaker-esque douchebag who's like cares about patriotism and shit. I feel like
I'm not gonna go that
I'm making
far.
way too many Suicide Squad comparisons, but
well, I mean the comparisons make themselves. But just as far as John Walker, as far as Wyatt Russell's character goes, I wouldn't go that far because that character I feel like was set up to be a lot more tragic than the Peacemaker character. I feel like the Peacemaker character was set up to be a joke, just to be like the, you know, like the Yang to
I feel like at the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, he sort of came to the place where Peacemaker begins in the Suicide Squad.
Sure. Like, it'll be interesting regardless to say
still
that
extreme because he's not going to say that he was not going to make all the sexual innuendo, but
right. But my point being that this is clearly not going to be. This is going to be marketed as like a Suicide Squad-esque movie, and it's not going to be it. And as far as the whole Steven Yeun thing goes, I mean, yeah, it's sad, but honestly, I feel like any person who drops out of Marvel at this point, I feel I just kind of want to like give them a pat on the back because I'm like, yes, there's finally people who are standing up to the machine. To the machine that has basically had Hollywood in a chokehold for the last 10 years, and that has been slowly kind of bankrupting it as well. And people continue to chase these $200-300 million budgets, then wonder, oh, why can't we make any of our money back? We're losing our money.
Yeah.
You know, nobody cares about going to the movie. So, like, the fact of, honestly, I say that we need more instances like this. We need more people saying no to Marvel and like wanting to go and do their own stuff because it shows that they're actually interested in improving their own brand. Because what is the thing that everybody has been saying about Marvel? Marvel does not make
They're just kind of
stars.
racking out too much.
Right. Everybody that is well known and loved because of Marvel was already kind of loved and well known pre-Marvel. Everybody. You know, I'd argue that the only stars that they've made, it's only two. It's Mark Ruffalo and Tom Holland. They're the only two. Nobody else that has come from Marvel is a star. Everybody is known for their Marvel thing.
I would definitely beg to differ. Like, first of all, there's been some debut actors. Like, we could go on about this forever. Like Letitia Wright, etc. And Ruffalo was an Oscar nominee before. But I definitely beg to differ. But also, look, we could talk forever about how Marvel is racking out way too much after Endgame and how they're kind of like the superhero fatigue seems to be really real among even comic book fans. But I do really hope this movie turns out well, just because I want to enjoy this movie. It looks like fun compared to like Brave New World, which looks kind of just like a money machine movie. I mean, they all are, but this one looks like a little more interesting. But if I had to recast, so you said maybe Ryan Gosling, I would say if they want to stick to an Asian actor for the sake of optics, I would say there's a great actor now by the name of Charles Melton who I think could fit the role really well.
That's actually not bad. That's actually pretty good. That's pretty good.
But yeah, I agree with a lot of the concerns. Even the big Avengers movies they have now are going through massive reworks because of Mr. Jonathan Majors. But this is the one that I'm hoping could be like the underdog fun movie, especially because of the creative team.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, I still love Marvel. I've still watched all of their movies. Again, I watched the Marvels, probably much to my chagrin, but Yeah, like I don't want these Marvel movies to continue sucking. It's been one of the worst instances of my movie watching experience these last couple of years, and seeing how, with the exception of No Way Home and Guardians 3, pretty much every Marvel movie's been kind of weak or underwhelming in some capacity. You know, I personally really like
Black Panther, Shang-Chi, right. I wouldn't.
I didn't like Shang-Chi. I wasn't a big fan of Shang-Chi. I really wasn't.
Damn, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so I'd like this one to do well, but we'll have to see. So next up is a franchise that sort of no longer is a franchise, and now it's just a piece of standalone movies, which for the better, I think. Julia Garner has now been cast alongside Christopher Abbott in Wolfman, directed by Lee Winnell. And I think he replaced Ryan Gosling, if I'm not mistaken, circling back to Mr. Gosling. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be really interesting because ever since The Mummy came out and was proven to be one of the worst movies ever made, and then they gave up the whole Universal Monsters idea multiple times. Like they tried it with The Mummy, they tried it with Dracula Untold, and then The Invisible Man came out. And it was one of the most surprising movies I've ever watched. It was so great. And Lee Winnell just seems to be like flourishing whenever he gets his mid-budget movies. And I mean, Julia Garner can do no wrong. So I'm actually very excited for this.
Similar stance as you. You know, I did not want to watch the Tom Cruise Mummy movie when that came out because it just looked unbearably, unbelievably awful. And then when the reviews came out, it basically like validated my reasoning for not wanting to watch that. I'm like, yeah, sure, okay, I'm never gonna watch another one of these again. I also didn't watch Dracula Untold, even though that looked slightly better than
I haven't seen it. It looked also
from what I've
horrible.
heard from what I've heard from my friends that have seen it, it's not the worst. It had potential, but they screwed up in a couple spots that basically made what could have been a good movie just not. And right, so I'm right there with you.
Have you seen the other any of the other Wolfman iterations? Because I actually never have.
So I have not, but I know a couple people who are actually a really, really big fan of the Benicio del Toro one from 2010. They say that it's very underrated, that it was criminally misunderstood when it came out, and that it actually is pretty good.
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's 2010, directed by Joe Johnston, director of The Rocketeer and the first Captain America movie. It stars Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. Like I said, it got really bad reviews when it first came out, but like I said, it's seen a little bit of a revisionist, a little bit more of a cult following in the years since it's come out. But as far as the Wolfman IP, I mean, I don't know. I feel like werewolf stories, similar to like Dracula stories and Frankenstein stories and zombie stories, it's like you've seen one, you've seen them all. I'm not saying it's bad. If anything, the reason why they really never make any changes to the story structure there is because the werewolf story is pretty well done. I'd say it's probably been done the best in American Werewolf in London. That's probably what I would say is the most consistent. I still haven't
watched that.
That's probably the most solid and consistent version of that story that I've seen. Obviously, you know, bringing it back to Marvel, how everything ties together. One of the Werewolf by Night, exactly. So, as far as the Wolfman IP, like I said, if it's anything like the Invisible Man, you know, as far as what Lee Winnell's going to bring to the table, kudos, you know, more power to him, because both that and his movie that he did before that, Upgrade, were massive surprises.
Upgrade was great.
Really, really awesome, really consistent, really like interesting, like how they played around with the typical jump scare formula, like how they managed to make that movie feel like really visceral and real. Like I remember like watching that, I was on the edge of my seat for that whole movie. Visible, I believe it actually made my top 10 movies of 2020 for, you know, all the 15 movies I was actually able to watch that year. And
I will say, yeah, werewolf stories. I feel like I haven't seen too many because I never like. It took me a while to get into some of the classic horrors, and I feel like maybe I'm apprehensive about that because, you know, once you've seen one, you've seen them all, sort of. But I feel like, you know, with Lee Winnell, anything has good potential. And, you know, Universal's continued to try Dracula. We might talk about it later. They tried it twice this year to no avail. But, you know, with Lee Winnell, I mean, bro's got my ticket.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. And as far as the whole casting thing, Christopher Abbott, I mean, yeah, I'm sad that Gosling's not doing it, but if I'm being honest, Gosling was probably a little too expensive for them. If I had to guess,
but it's Christopher Abbott still.
But that's what I mean. So Christopher Abbott, right? As far as replacing him, a little bit of a cheaper alternative, but Abbott's great. He's been having a great last couple of years. Turns out he's been in a lot more things that I've seen recently than not. Obviously, you know, in On the Count of Three, Gerard Carmichael's critically critically underrated and underseen directorial debut that came out that premiered at Sundance in 2021 and got a wide release on Hulu in 2022. He was just so spectacular in that. One of the best performances I've seen. A great, last minute jump in at the end of Poor Things. I'm also, funnily enough, watching Girls the first season, and he's in that. No, Christopher Abbott's great. He can do no wrong. I'm super pumped that he's got this. And as for Julia Garner, yeah, I mean, the girl, she keeps getting more wins post Ozark. Good for her.
Yeah, I mean, she was probably like the best TV performance of last year, and she keeps impressing. She was almost Madonna until that movie got shelved.
Yeah,
but yeah, she's awesome.
Cool to watch.
And then our final piece of news is now talking about another show that may have also arguably been the best TV of 2022, which is the White Lotus, which has just cast its lineup for its third season. A while ago, it was revealed that Natasha Rothwell is coming back from season 1, but now we've also got Jason Isaacs, who I think is absolutely perfect for this show, Michelle Monaghan, Parker Posey, and Leslie Bibb. And wow, this makes me excited. Like this show is just on a roll. I was a little late to the game, but the first season had me so intrigued. And then the second season is some of the best realized, craziest, brilliant seasons of TV I've ever seen. So whatever they've got next, if Mike White's still writing and directing and got such a cool lineup of actors, I'm down. I'm game. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah, so here's my thing on White Lotus, right? So obviously HBO was looking for what could potentially be its next It show, because they were trying to line up another couple hits after the success of Succession. They at the time when White Lotus came out, Succession was still on its COVID break. It was still a couple months before it came back. They weren't sure whether it was going to come, how much longer it was going to keep going for. So they were trying to line up hits. Also, White Lotus was a little bit of a COVID experiment where they were literally just trying to be like, okay, what can we shoot in a short amount of time, all in one isolated location? And Mike White comes in with this idea to basically essentially create basically what I like to call my basic summation of White Lotus is that it's basically vacation porn with ridiculously attractive people that also serves as a metaphor for class warfare, basically, which is where what happens when you actually are able to witness the dynamics of the workers of these vacation luxury resorts versus the people who attend there. And I will admit the second season was a lot better for me than the first season. The first season, I wasn't really sure where it was going. There were a couple characters that I didn't think were as well flushed out as they probably should have been. And also just the fact of I don't really like any of these characters. I'm like, they're well written, it's intriguing, the music, all that. They're all ridiculously attractive. There's tons of underlying sexual tension here amongst all those characters. But I felt like the first season was I compare the White Lotus a lot to the Bear, where it's the first season was an appetizer, a morsel, and it gave you sort of an idea of what the show was about, but it didn't really go as deep as it could have. And then the second season,
well, for me, it's I've actually heard a lot of people differing. That's I've heard it pretty split among my friends who prefer 1 or 2. I'm team the second one with you, but not by too much. First one's 9 out of 10, second one's 10 out of 10 for me. But absolutely I'm just hyped. That's all I'm going to say. I have no negative things to say. I have only positive to say about White Lotus.
Yeah, and the other thing also, too, to consider as well is the whole anthology, right? So, obviously, American Horror Story kicks off this whole trend back in 2011 of these shows where they basically, they swap out cast and introduce a new set of cast and characters in each season. Now, each show is different, right? American Horror Story does not do it the same way that Fargo does it, does not do it the same way that True Detective does it. And I would say those are probably the 3 big ringleaders. There have been a ton of other shows that have done that since, but for the most part, and like I said, there have been other shows that kind of play around on it, shows where it's just one lead character and they go to a different location each season and introduce a new set of characters, right? And White Lotus is kind of basically taking in all of those, where you had the Jennifer Coolidge character was the only one that was in both the first and second seasons, and then, her husband, Greg. And then we all, no spoilers, but for anybody who saw how the second season ended, she ain't coming back. And so now they make the decision to bring back, which is probably the funniest instance of that second season. That's the other thing, too, is why I like the second season more. And I thought the second season was a lot funnier. Because I'm the show is marketed as a comedy, but none of this, what I'm watching in the first season, is making me laugh hard, except probably the bit where Steve Zahn's funny. It definitely really
treads the lines, it's such a weird show to categorize, but that's part of the thing that I absolutely love about it. But yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, the second season I'm a much more a fan of. I like the characters more. I thought they were more intriguing. I just like the cast more in the second season better. Like you got Aubrey Plaza, Michael Imperioli, F. Murray Abraham, Haley Lou Richardson, not to mention the newcomers, like the two girls that they got playing the Italian prostitutes are like, oh my God, like where did those two, and now Simona Tabasco is going to be in Sydney Sweeney's next movie. I'm like, I might need to be restrained a little bit. Yeah, that's too much sexual.
Season 1 and season 2 coming together.
Exactly. I'm like, that's too much sexual tension for maybe even me to handle. But so you got this cast, right, that's announced, what is it, yesterday for season 3, right? So you got, I'm like, Leslie Bibb, Jason Isaacs, Parker Posey, and Michelle Monaghan are 4. There was also a rumor that was dropped by Jeff Snyder that potentially you could also see Woody Harrelson and Walton Goggins joining as well, which I'm like, Walton
Goggins would be perfect for this show.
First of all,
now I'm going to be mad if he's not in the show.
First of all, Walton Goggins is the type of guy, he can literally show up anywhere for anything, and it just works. Like, he just randomly popped up in I'm a Virgo. Well, last year, the Booth Riley show, right? And I'm just like, what? Like, they didn't even tell you as part of the marketing that he was gonna be in this, and then he just shows up, and you're like, wait, what?
Now I'm gonna be, you're ruining the season for me because now I'm gonna be so disappointed if Walton Goggins is not in the White Lotus season 3. So that's a good place to
Yeah, but I know I'm looking forward to White Lotus season 3. Season 2 won me over in a way that I wasn't expecting, so I'm looking forward to season 3.
Okay.